Hello there, friends. It is Jimmie Maverick. Welcome once again to the Fantasy Frenzy podcast. We are just a few days away from the Super Bowl. I'm looking forward to that. I sure hope it's going to be a good game. Of course, as I mentioned last week, I am still picking the Niners. I'm picking the Niners to win it. Whenever it comes to the Super Bowl, I always bet on the better defense. Although, I gotta say, man, the Chiefs have shown that no lead is safe. So really, what I'm hoping for here, man, I think this is what everybody hopes for, a good game. I don't want any boring games. No snooze fest like last year, man. Let's have a lot of points scored, make it a lot of fun, a raucous good time. I got a party happening. I got my favorite food set up. I got Totino pizza rolls and buffalo wings. It's going to be a good time. Great night for my stomach, so I'm happy for that. Some good beer. But what we can start doing now, man, is talking about next season, the 2020 fantasy season. And this is, for me, this is the most fun part of the season, man. I mean, we've got free agency coming up. We got the draft coming up. Then it'll be OTAs. And then we'll have training camp and then preseason. And then before you know it, the season's going to be started again. All right. So we got to get started looking at these players. And one of the first things I like to look at is the highest risk players, the ones that I call regression players, because I feel that their performance is going to drop off a significant amount next year to make them poor choices for your fantasy team. So when I look at regression players, there's two types of players that I look at. Okay, so the first type of player is the player that broke NFL records. Okay, if they broke an NFL record, for me, that person is a huge candidate to regress the following season because it's very hard to break a record after you broke a record, all right? So I'm going to give you some examples here. Now, this is from the 2018 season, and I'm sure you know who all these guys are because they are all fantastic. 2018 season was an amazing season for them, but, you know, you got Patrick Mahomes, 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, only the third player to do that in NFL history. You have Saquon Barkley, who had over 2,000 scrimmage yards in his rookie season. You had Travis Kelce, who broke the NFL receiving records for tight ends. And then you got George Kittle, who later that very same afternoon broke Kelsey's record. So, you know, these guys all did amazing, and they were all a critical part of your team making getting that fantasy championship in 2018. All right, well, let's follow up, man. How did these guys do the next year? Well, first, let's look at Mahomes. He averaged 34.6 points per game, and he was drafted. His ADP was at 107. All right. So he was a humongous bargain. He did so much for your fantasy team because he offered so much value. But look what happened in 2019. His per game stats slipped to 28.5 points per game. That's a 17.6% decline. And don't forget that he missed 3 games because of injury, right? And that just annihilated his value as far as those people who had to take him at the lofty price of ADP 22. End of the second round. That's devastating for anybody that took Patrick Mahomes. And that's why you should have stayed away from him. And I actually was not recommending taking him. You look at Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley went from 23.8 points per game last year to 19.6 this year. Missed a few games because of injury, dealt with a high ankle sprain as well. So again, about the same level of decline, 17.6% decline. And of course, his ADP moved up from middle of the first round to number 1 overall pick. Again, not worth the pick. Let's go on to Kelce, man. Kelce went from 16.5 points per game to 14.4 points per game. Again, it's a decline, not as steep as the other guys, but significant. He had 5 fewer touchdowns, and his ADP moved up substantially from 33. So he was like a late second round, early third round pick last season, you know, in 2018, 2019, ADP 14, that's the beginning of the second round. Okay, you had to pay up to get Kelce. And because of that, he was not worth the pick. No value. Finally, we got George Kittle. Again, Kittle, not that much of a decline, really. Only 6.7% decline. Look at his ADP, though. Went from 131 to 21. And again, missed several games because of injury. And because of that, not worth the pick. So that's why I like to stay away from these record setters. And of course, we know who they are for this season, right? Whoops, I'm sorry, went too far there. Okay, there we go. Lamar Jackson, obviously number 1 quarterback. He was drafted at ADP 84. This year, they are projecting him right now at ADP 18. So again, second round pick for those that take him. And let me tell you, he's got a lot of risk associated with his draft position. And we'll talk about that in more detail in one of my future things. But he is a huge regression candidate for touchdown efficiency. His touchdown efficiency was off the charts this year. Unbelievably efficient. I think he's going to suffer significantly next season as defenses learn how to defend against him. And, like I said, I would just stay away from Lamar Jackson in next year's draft. Likewise, Michael Thomas, the number one wide receiver by a long shot. He was amazing this year. Unbelievable performance. His ADP is going to move up accordingly. He's going to be the number one wide receiver taken off the board, probably at around the 5th or 6th pick. And again, this guy broke Marvin Harrison's receiving record. He had like 175 targets. I don't see that repeating. I just don't see him being able to get that much volume next year. And those people that are going to have to take him as early as they're going to have to take him to get him on their team are going to be disappointed with the result. Now, I was wrong about Michael Thomas last year because I thought he was a regression candidate last year. This is full disclosure, man. But this year he did even better. So the level is that much higher. So, I mean, there's a lot of risks with Michael Thomas. He's a fantastic player. Don't get me wrong. He is great. He will still do great. He's still going to give you wide receiver 1 numbers. But if he comes in at a mid to low end wide receiver 1, when you took him as your number 1 overall pick, you're going to be disappointed that you drafted him. All right. So finally, we got the big guy, Christian McCaffrey. Unbelievable performance, man. I mean, just amazing. Even in games where the Panthers got blown out, he would still get 20 points. I don't know how he did it. They'd score like 7 points, and you look at his stat line, and he caught like 12 passes, and he'd end up with 24 points. I'm like, I don't even know how he did it. But let's look at what's going on here. Certainly, Cam Newton is probably gone, right? We got a new coach. We got a new offensive system coming in. I'm sure they're concerned about the workload he has been given, and it is substantial. I'm guessing they're probably going to draft probably a change of pace guy to take the load off of Christian McCaffrey. And again, I see these stats declining. And when you're talking the number 1 pick in the draft, the same player has not repeated as the best player in the NFL for 2 seasons in a row. It just doesn't happen. So he's not going to be the number 1 running back next year. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not going to happen. So stay away from him. You want the guy that is going to be the number 1 running back in the league on your team if you happen to be lucky enough to be picking early in your fantasy draft. So those are 3 guys that you should stay away from. But the other kind of player that I also completely avoid in fantasy drafts are those players that were on a contract year and they had a career best performance. Okay, so their stats were better than they had ever been in any previous season of theirs in the NFL. So it's a personal best. And now they're going to get a huge payday, and it's going to be, again, there is a ton of risk here. So let's start out. Dak Prescott, amazing year. Fantastic season. An unbelievable draft bargain because he was like the 14th or 15th quarterback taken off the board. So you got him way late in the draft. He gave you QB1, high-end QB1 numbers week after week, and was just a superstar, okay? You got Austin Hooper, who, in my opinion, had he not been sidelined by that injury, this guy would have been a top 3 tight end this year. Now, he ended up with, he missed 3 games, and then his performance in the final 3 games was rather lackluster. But let me tell you this, man, his volume was outstanding, and, he does have upside next year. We'll see what happens, but he is a very risky player. He's moved up significantly on the draft board, probably around 3 or 4 rounds up from where he was last year. And so again, the value's not going to be there as much as it was this past season. You got Jameis Winston, another contract year player, man. I mean, we can call his season amazing. It was pretty good, but it was pretty bad too. That's the nature of Jameis Winston. How much do you want to bet that he's going to backslide next year? He is like, I call him the new Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's the new Fitzmagic, man. He is, when he's good, he's very, very good. When he's bad, he's horrible. He's going to be horrible. Trust me on this. I don't think Tampa Bay should re-sign him. Just let him go to the free agent market. Find someone else because he's never going to get you to the playoffs. He's too much of a bonehead with game time decisions, and he can't get it done on the field consistently. So you can't trust him. So anyway, I don't like him. And then you got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, boy, he was amazing this year, right? Oh yeah, it was a contract year. He's looking to get paid. I'm sure he's going to get a nice payday, and at worst, he's going to get probably the transition tag or something like that, where they're going to pay him towards the top of the list as far as paydays for running backs. But again, he had a great year. He also played with a contract year player, Ryan Tannehill. That's another guy on this list who you should be very cautious about. And they both played out of their minds. Although he doesn't catch any passes, his role is very limited. So if the Titans are down, he basically disappears, like what happened in the AFC Championship game. He didn't even show up in the whole second half of that game because they had to start passing the ball. So again, he's going to be a top 7 pick this year. I think he's a bad choice. You're not going to want to take a player like that. Also, one more not pictured here, Amari Cooper, another guy, had a great year. All these guys are going to get paid this year, and some of them may stay on their team or they're going to go to different teams. There's a lot of there's a lot of downside risk here, and you don't want that with your fantasy players. You want fantasy players with upside risk, right? You want them to have upside potential, and you want the value. These guys aren't going to get you the value because of these performances they've had. They're all moving way up the draft board, and as opposed to where they were last year. So any value they might have is washed away by their high draft position. So again, stay away from these two kind of players. Guys that broke NFL records last season and contract year players that had a personal best season. All right. Stay away from those guys. You're going to be good. Now, next week, we're going to talk about reversion players. And these are players that underperformed this last year that have a chance to seriously rebound in 2020. So those are the kind of guys that I like because they are often dropped down the draft board. They're a lot cheaper to get, and so you can get some significant value out of them. Thanks for watching, everybody out there, and this is Jimmie Maverick. We will be back next week. I'll have Swami Rob with me. We'll be talking about the Super Bowl, wrapping up that. Of course, talking about the reversion players as well. And anyway, enjoy the week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Let's just hope for a great game. I want a great, exciting game. And like I said, picking the Niners. Sorry, Chiefs fans. But it's going to be the Niners. So thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.